concerned, would we find a school that would take him and that he would be safe at? But it's sort of, if they didn't feel they could look after him and keep him safe, who could? Sort of teased Will that he wouldn't be able to go trick-or-treating and have the same treats as everyone else.
Yeah.
And that was quite a hard moment when he came home from school and was talking about that. And
Hello and welcome back to the Making Sane podcast. I'm joined by Sarah Knight, the CEO and founder of the Allergy Team. So thank you for coming on the podcast today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
I know. So we went out for a coffee a few weeks back, and obviously we kind of got to know a bit about the Allergy Team and kind of your journey. But if we kind of start from the very beginning, I mean, do you have allergies yourself, or is it your little boys have got allergies?
So I always say I don't have allergies myself. Really randomly in my mid-late 20s, I did develop a really random allergy.
Oh, really? What was that?
Juniper berries. So no gin for me.
Oh, really? Did you come out with like an itchy throat, or was it like a sore throat?
Hives on my face and my hands, and then my hands would really swell up.
Yeah.
And then like terrible urticaria for like quite a while afterwards. So not a typical kind of reaction. I think it's probably a delayed allergy, because it happens sort of about 12 hours later, and then it's really uncomfortable for a really long time. So it's really worth avoiding. Like I'm really...
What about now then? Have you outgrown it, or do you still just avoid it just in case?
I avoid it just in case. Yeah.
So then you've got a little boy called Will. How old was he when you found out he had these very kind of serious allergies?
So we found out when he was about 6 months old, trying to introduce milk. So he was a breastfed baby, and he had, I now know, lots of warning signs. He had really poor eczema, his weight gain wasn't really good, and he had reflux, which we'd been to the doctor for, and in fact we'd been to hospital because of his weight gain, but no one suggested an allergy. And then at about 6 months old, I gave him a bit of formula, and he developed these little white lumps around his mouth, and he wouldn't really take the bottle. And I was thinking, oh, it's because he doesn't want the bottle, not because of the milk.
The actual thing, yeah.
And I did mention it in a health visitor clinic thing, and the woman said, oh, don't worry, you can't be that allergic to milk, carry on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was 2012, so it's not that long ago. And I went home and I carried on, and these white lumps got bigger, and I was feeding him, and I realized baby clinic was on at the same time. And so I bundled him into the buggy, went round the corner. The doctor's surgery was just around the corner, and I took him in. And by the time I got there, the lumps were like the size of a 50p piece. And I went in and I said, I'm here for baby clinic, but actually, is there a doctor here? Because I don't know what's going on with my baby. And they said, oh, it's not a drop-in clinic. Wait for the health visitor. And I was waiting in the queue, and as I was waiting, Will was getting redder and redder, and the lumps were getting bigger. And then he began to sort of gurgle in the back of his throat, at which point
So scary, I imagine, being the parent and not really know what was happening to your little boy.
Yeah, it was terrifying. And so I grabbed him and I ran past all of the people in the queue, and I said, someone needs to help me. And you know, lots of people came forward, and a health visitor sort of ushered me and Will into a separate room, and we stripped all of his clothes off, and someone ran to go and get a doctor. And just, I think it was cold and the sort of frantic kind of movement and stripping all his clothes off, he you know, started to breathe normally, and his skin was still bright red, but he began to sort of calm down. And following that, we were then booked into a hospital appointment, and we went to the hospital, and that's where they diagnosed him with a very severe milk allergy, and they said that was a sign of anaphylaxis, and they gave us adrenaline pens and told us we absolutely had to avoid all traces of dairy.
It's so scary as well, because I've heard stories like this before where the parents have just gone with their instinct and gut feeling, where the doctors haven't kind of diagnosed of it straight away, or they've not realised it's a food allergy, and they've been like you said, just keep drinking the milk. And then you got to go with that kind of gut feeling from the parent, and just know something doesn't feel quite right. Was it one after that then? Did you feel like you got educated then, or was you just in this kind of new world where you had to kind of learn yourself in regards to what Will can eat, or kind of like the traces or may contain it?
A bit of both. The hospital was great. Once we were in the hospital and the kind of in the system, they were great. They immediately booked him in for a full set of skin prick tests to see about other allergens, because we were just embarking on weaning. They told us to avoid all other allergens until they could get him in, and they could get him in quite quickly.
That's good.
So that was really helpful on kind of understanding it as a medical condition. But no one helps you on how to live with it and the impact on your life. And I've never really looked at a food wrapper or ingredient. You know, I didn't know anything about this. And I remember, you know, hours of sitting, calling manufacturers, asking them if the food was safe. And I was so scared. And the support outside of the hospital environment on a condition which is pretty life-changing just was, you know, it wasn't there.
It's like the aftermath, really. Like they kind of like give you the EpiPens and say, "Oh, you did me diagnosed with an allergy," and then you just kind of go off into this world, and it's just like you said, it is life changing in terms of like constantly have to like repackaging now or constantly aware. In terms of the allergy testing with Will, was it the skin prick test, and then how was that kind of journey with the allergy testing? Was it skin prick testing like the blood test?
Skin prick tests. I don't remember if he had blood tests then. He's had them since. And there were quite a lot of things that came up on the blood test. The skin prick test. Eggs, soya, and then some of the nuts, they were kind of inconclusive. So then came, and wheat. Then came a big, long list of allergy appointments where we'd have to go in and do food challenges to see whether, because of his allergy was so strong to milk, they didn't want me to introduce a lot of them at home. They wanted me to do it in the hospital environment. And so then the next 6 months was weaning, was just this, you know, period of in and out of hospital. Was this a reaction? Was it not a reaction? We became convinced that some kind of spice was giving him, but actually it was possibly just, you know, eczema and it, you know, it made us very, very jumpy.
They're very linked, are the eczema and allergies. I remember my mum saying on a podcast a few years ago, I had eczema as a kid, and I was like, yeah, it's not linked with allergies. And then had another parent on the podcast, and I think Emma was saying, yeah, like eczema and allergies are so like very closely linked. So did he struggle with eczema then?
Yeah, he did. And that is one of the big warning signs. If a child has got like moderate to severe eczema, it's like really, really important that you ask them, could there be an allergy related here?
I wonder what the link is there. I can't say too much about it because I don't know too much between the link, but no, it's really interesting. Like that could be like the first kind of warning sign for people to kind of be aware of. So when then Will obviously going to school, was that quite hard picking the right school in regards to them understanding how serious his allergy was, or do they have the right training in place? Because I've got a very close friend, Aaron, and he's got a young brother, and they really struggled with schools where they said if you went into anaphylactic shock, they couldn't administer the EpiPen, and it was a really weird ground where if they do it and they do it incorrectly, then the school's like responsible. It was really weird. They had a really tough time with that.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was really bad. How was that for you then in regards to kind of finding the right school, and did they kind of understand the severities of it?
Yeah, there are 3 local schools near us, and we looked at all of them, and actually we were looking kind of at preschool age, so the year before reception, because we wanted to settle Will in as soon as possible, so they really got to know him, and we thought it would be a smaller environment and stuff. And actually the school that we were hoping he was going to go to, they offered us a place in the preschool, and then when they found out about his food allergies, they took it away.
What?
They said,
is crazy. Like that is,
I know. I mean, it's complete discrimination, and I couldn't believe it. And I was really anxious about school, and it made me so much more anxious because then a school was telling me that they couldn't look after my child. It was like all of my worst kind of. So then I was like, will I find a school that? It's
like we don't want to take on that responsibility. Now we found out he's got a food allergy, and I can't imagine from the parent, it must be like anger as well. I think you feel like, well, no one anxiousness at the fact like they're not going to kind of take it on, and then obviously angry that like discrimination, like because they got a food allergy that they didn't want to kind of take him on. Like.
I think I don't think I even went as close to anger because I think I was so anxious that was the kind of dominating kind of feeling, and concerned. Would we find a school that would take him and that he would be safe at? But it's sort of, if they didn't feel they could look after him and keep him safe, who could? Like, was I going to find somewhere? he'd been to nursery though, so I was a little bit like, oh, if the nursery can deal with it, and he's younger, then so I sort of clung on to that. And then I went to another local school who was completely the opposite, and it was like a warm hug. I was like, this is my son Will, he's got food allergies. They're like, that's no problem. Come in, we're used to this, we can do this, what do we need to do, let's work together. They were incredible, and we've had a really good relationship with them since. Luckily he managed to stay there for reception and onwards, and we've just worked really well together. There's really good communication between us. They seek it out, I give it to the, I
think that's so important to have that communication. Do you have the communication with like the catering there? I remember my mum going to primary school to kind of speak to the chefs. Is that something you've had to do, or the school just very good at kind of communicating to the catering about your little boy's allergy?
It's in-house catering, and when he first started, we had a meeting with the chef and went through all of that. He was there because he started at preschool. He was there for a while before he started having food there, so they knew him really well, which also made me feel really better. And then then we met the chef before he started having school lunches, and just everyone was brilliant. They've got it's just really well set up. They really understand, and they're really inclusive. If it's pancake day, they'll make pancakes that are egg and dairy free for the whole school.
Oh wow,
that's
amazing.
Or sometimes not for the whole school, but they'll make sure that there's egg and dairy free pancakes for Will. And so they're just always thinking, if there's a sort of a Caribbean day or a French day or something special, they'll contact me a couple of weeks in advance and often say, we're buying this for Will, it's really similar to everyone else, is it okay? And
that's
they'll give me the ingredients.
That they go the extra mile to make him feel included, because I think that's a lot of issues sometimes. Like, people feel a bit excluded when they've got an allergy, when they get older and they can't eat at certain restaurants or go out with like certain friends to different places. So that's really nice that the school kind of take that responsibility on them.
Totally. And I think it's so important because, we know that kids are twice as likely to be bullied if they've got food allergies than if they're not. And so working in that kind of partnership is so important, and everything that can be done to include children, any child with any kind of medical condition or anything, is so important. But allergy, especially as food is such a big part of our lives. I really wanted to
talk about, obviously, kind of like food bullying. It's not something... For me, I never really experienced it when I get asked this question. And I think it's because I feel like allergies now is more in the forefront in regard to, you see it on social media or you see it in the news now. How has your experience been with like Will and Freddie? Have they had any experiences in regards to kind of food bullying with allergies, or has it been relatively a good experience like so far?
It's been a pretty good experience. There's been one comment a few years ago by someone. It was Halloween, and they sort of teased Will that he wouldn't be able to go trick-or-treating and have the same treats as everyone else. And that was quite a hard moment when he came home from school and was talking about that, and he was really upset by it. Luckily, we spoke to the school. I actually also knew the mother of the boy, and I dropped her a text and we spoke about it, and it was dealt with. Actually, it was dealt with really firmly by the school immediately. Oh, wow. It was just like, the boy was called into the office, talked to by the head teacher. This must not happen. And I think, again, it's working with the school to make sure that there's a decent understanding of food allergies, not just within the staff, but also within all of the school, so that it isn't acceptable or
it should be
okay at all.
Same as like bullying. Like, and does it worry you? Because when I went through school, there wasn't really kind of like social media. When I got into the last final year of kind of secondary school, like year 10 and year 11, I think that's when Facebook got introduced. But then I didn't have it on my phone. Like, you would only go on it like after work. And I think the only other social media app was MSN, which back in the day was like the instant chat. You go home after school and like, you speak to each other like that. And I find it hard now, obviously, with social media being so kind of involved in teens' lives from kind of like going through school. Is that something which kind of like worries you in regards to people writing comments? Or because a lot of time you don't even have to do it in person, it'd be over kind of like social media. As a parent, is that something which kind of worries you?
I guess that, as the parent of a 9 and a 6-year-old, the whole of, at the moment, social media worries me, and online kind of stuff. I suppose I haven't and also so does his food allergies. I guess I haven't really combined those two thoughts.
Okay. I don't want to like.
Thanks. But I am really conscious that food allergy and relationships with his peers and the wider kind of, I suppose, society is really important, and getting that right. And worrying and wondering what I can do as a parent to best support him in this.
Yeah.
And it's that balance, isn't it, between how much you talk about it at home in a way to empower your child, but equally not to let it dominate things. And so there's a healthy relationship with his food allergies where he's strong, he knows what to do, he knows how to ask the right question, but that isn't him.
It's finding that right messaging as well, because I think with Make and Tain, I've always really want to be like positive about allergies, but then there's times where I say something and it's just from a personal experience, but then I'm like, oh God, like the last thing I want is to make people feel anxious. And it's the same with I can imagine like talking to your child, it's finding that kind of right balance. Like you want to empower them, but you also kind of want to educate them about how serious having an allergy is.
Yeah, it's both how serious it is and educating them, but also giving them the confidence, but also making them not feel like that food allergies is everything about them. You know, it's such a tiny part, you know, and actually it should be, you know, they play football, passionate about, you know, reading
I was going to say what they're like kind of like super passionate about. Then you've mentioned like football on your website. Like, are they really into like the sports and kind of, are they very kind
obsessed.
Of social in terms of like with the friends? Like,
obsessed with football.
That's amazing.
Like, absolutely love it. Both of them. Cars.
Yeah.
Obsessed by cars.
Oh, really?
Last weekend, we went into central London just to go to look through the windows of a car showroom.
Oh, wow.
They really wanted to see a Bugatti.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I didn't even know, but I mean, when did I learn that a Bugatti existed? I don't know, probably not very long ago.
At such a young age.
Well, they're just obsessed with like fast, fancy cars. So Ferraris. So we went into.
I can see if I can get them a placement. When I got offered a placement when I was at university for a company called Overfinch, and they get all the Range Rovers and sports cars and put the body kits on them and make them like super sporty.
Oh my God, the dream.
They would love that, yeah. So I'll try and dig out the email. I'm sure I might have someone in there. But it'd be great if
basically Will, if he doesn't become a footballer, wants to like design fast cars.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect step in. Like, that's what they do. Like they put all these like crazy body kits on the car and make them faster. But
they are really typical kind of boyish boys.
Yeah.
And they're really sociable too. You know, they're lucky they've got a wide group of friends who you know, who they get on really well with, and whose sort of parents are really, really amazing with their food allergies too. And there's a handful of friends I can send my boys to and feel completely confident that they'll be okay on a play date without me there. And that's great. Really great.
That's amazing then. I was going to say in regards to back to kind of like social media, I was watching a few videos about this the other day in regards to like kids now can spend up to like 8 hours a day on like TikTok or like YouTube, and like do you like have to like set limits? Because it's something which worries me if I had a kid now, because you got like TikTok is so addictive and like YouTube, and like I was watching this video and like kids were spending 8 hours a day because they didn't put a limit on it to see if the kids like was on it. And to be fair, the study showed that once they got out the system over the days, it went from 8 hours to 7 hours to 6 hours to 5 hours. But yeah, it's interesting in regards to like, do you think you should like set limits in regards to how much time? Because you still want them to go out and socialize in person rather than through an app. So
they're still a bit young for kind of social media. Will fairly obsessively watch FIFA strategy on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he definitely likes to play computer games.
Yeah.
So we do set limits on that. They're allowed to do it on like Friday, Saturday and Sunday for a small amount of time, because I think it is important that they're on it and that they get to do it and it's fun and it's what their friends are doing. But it's setting those boundaries.
That balance. In regards to kind of Will, obviously then as he gets older and obviously going to like university where he does kind of take on that responsibility for the first time, is that something which as a parent in the back of your mind obviously quite scary in the sense that like that he's gonna, at some point when he kind of moves away from home, he's got to take on that responsibility where he's got to speak up about it with new people and kind of restaurants. And I remember doing a study like a few years ago, and I was really shocked to find that not many kind of young people did kind of, number one, carry the EpiPens. I think it was like 40% didn't, and the other part was a lot of them didn't feel confident to speak up about it.
Yeah, it really terrifies me. And I think we did a really interesting Q&A with Professor Graham Roberts a few weeks ago. Graham Roberts, his sort of whole thing is kind of around children taking on responsibility and that transition from child to adulthood, and how you best prepare them to be ready. And he was, absolutely, we should be starting now. And we are, like, just not so much consciously, I suppose, but just by modeling behavior of, like, if you do go out and eat out, you're really clear about asking about food allergies. The boys are always conscious that we have their EpiPens or where their EpiPens are. And I often ask Will to carry his in his rucksack.
Yeah.
And if he's going to a play date, we talk about it and he takes it. And so sort of small things like that. But then Professor Roberts went on to sort of say he had really good strategies. For example, as your child gets older and are in their teens, get them to be responsible for carrying their EpiPen. Don't always ask them if they've got it. But the time you don't ask them is when they're going to your neighbour's house and you're at home, 1 minute away, and that's the first time you don't ask them, maybe. So then if they do make a mistake, it's within a safe environment. Then when they come home, say, did you have it with them? Yeah. And hopefully if they didn't, the shock then and the responsibility they've now got will hopefully really help them. And I thought that's really nice. Yeah. These strategies were really, because he said if you as the mum are always saying to your child, have you got your adrenaline pen? Have you got your adrenaline pen? Yeah. Then they'll always have it. But then the time that you're not there to ask them, they might forget. So you've got to give them a responsibility, which terrifies me.
Yeah, it's getting into that habit as well. Like for me, it was always like phone, wallet, keys, EpiPen. And even now when I leave the house, I'm like phone, wallet, keys, EpiPen. And like the chances of me forgetting my EpiPen are very, very slim. There's been times where I've got to work and be like, oh my God, I don't have it. And then work like, no, just go home and get it. Like, so that's really good. But like, it is getting into that habit as well. It's like, you won't leave the house without your keys or your phone. So like, why would you do the same with the EpiPen?
Yeah, it's
but yeah, that's a really nice idea in terms of like, if you know he's nearby, like when he comes back, like ask that question. That's really interesting. Mate.
And it's so hard not to perhaps always ask that question before they leave, but it's so important that you have to step back to help. Anyway, that is all ahead, but it's I do get quite scared by it, but hopefully using people like Professor Roberts' advice. Yeah,
that's amazing. In regards to then kind of like anxiousness, I know a lot of people with allergies do suffer with anxiety. It's something I've suffered with from time to time, and I've kind of spoke quite openly about it. Is that something which kind of, I mean, for example, do Will and Freddie kind of suffer with allergy anxiety, or if so, how do you kind of deal with that, or how do you kind of make them feel less anxious going forward?
So far, they haven't had there's been moments of anxiety, like before an oral food challenge we did an oral food challenge with milk with Will a couple of years ago, and the time before that was when he was 2 and he had anaphylaxis in hospital, and it was quite dramatic, and so there was quite a build up to that, and he was definitely anxious. So were we, really anxious, all of us, but we were quite open about that, and it was very much, even though Will was still really young, he was about probably 6 or 7 then, we included him on the decision whether to do it. And we had advice from a brilliant nurse at the allergy clinic who also sat down with Will beforehand and gave him an opportunity to ask her questions, and he did. Will doesn't speak up hugely about his food allergies, but just occasionally, and I really try and encourage it in a hospital appointment so that he engages too. I'm like, what question have you got? So before we went, and his question was, if something goes wrong, what will happen? And can I get really sick from this? And the nurse was brilliant in answering him, and I think made him feel that they were very much in control of the situation. It was a really safe environment to do it in, and it was worth doing, because if there had been a change to his food allergies, then that was a really positive thing. and so we did it, and it was totally fine. He reacted straight away, and it was dealt with very quickly by the hospital, and we sort of, we didn't move us on in that sense. But I think it was quite a positive experience because it made it less daunting and scary.
If it does happen, yeah. I think that's a really good point as well. Like, I had a guest on a couple of weeks back, and she did like the allergy testing later on. So she was same age as me, like 29, 30. And she was saying, because she did these tests, and like you say, you do have like a mild allergic reaction, and like she got to understand whether it was allergic reaction or was it an anxiety attack. So she's like, now, because I had the people around me, so I knew I was safe anyway if it did get worse and our throat started swelling. But she said, because I've been in that situation now, going forward when I go to like different like restaurants, I know now, like, is it me just like getting myself worked up, or am I actually having an allergic reaction? So in some ways it's quite positive because you can distinguish now, and it can be really hard sometimes to distinguish, am I having an allergic reaction, or is it just my anxiety kind of taking over? Yeah,
and as a parent as well, that's really, I'd only really seen Will have an allergic reaction when he was really little, and he couldn't communicate then. And one of my biggest fears was like, will I know that he's definitely having an allergic reaction, or how will I know? And it was really good that also I realized he's old enough to communicate that, and he's able to communicate how he's feeling, and he understands how he's feeling. So it was positive in that sense. And it was also positive in the sense that I think if we got to do another oral food challenge, he wouldn't feel quite so anxious about it because he would trust the system and stuff. So there have been anxiety, but sort of mainly related to an incident or a moment as opposed to a general thing.
Yeah.
But it's something I'm really aware of. And I think as he grows older and becomes more aware of how impactful food allergies can be, it's something definitely that I'll be looking for advice and help for.
Yeah, I know we kind of spoke off camera, and I was saying it didn't really affect me until I was probably like 25 or 26 and started kind of making tea, and I was doing all this research, and for me that's when it like really kind of hit home. And then I was eating out, or I was constantly having these like panic attacks like all the time. And I think it's one of them, it's always going to be there, but I think it's how you kind of cope with it.
And how do you cope with it?
I try and like, I'm really bad for this, but I'm always like pulling down my t-shirt and looking at my neck, or speaking to my girlfriend about, is there a rash on my neck? And she's like, no, it's fine. And it's really hard. I feel like I think I cope with it because I do eat out, but I'm always like checking my neck, or like sometimes I think that makes it worse though, like going like, because I speak to my girlfriend and she says there's no rash, then I shouldn't have to go to the mirror and start checking, like. But yeah, it's one of them where I'm always just kind of, it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm always like checking my neck. And
have you ever got help for it, for anxiety?
Yes and no. Not specific for food allergies, no, but for other anxieties, yes. In terms of like, I'm a bit of an overthinker, and I mean most people are, to be honest. But yeah, not like, I don't really suffer with it like extremely bad, but yeah, I do have anxieties in my life and stuff, and I think that probably trickles over to food allergies in some way. And
do you find food allergy anxiety happens, for example, when you're eating out, as opposed to before you go to sleep at night, or like, is that how it kind of affects you?
It's only eating out, to be honest. I think when it's definitely more so if it's a new restaurant, because it's a new restaurant and you're like, oh, they're going to take it seriously. And that's when I'm like, I've ruined someone's t-shirt. I'm always like pulling t-shirt neckline down so it's like so I can see my chest. So yeah, I think it's more so like new restaurants, and we do eat out at new restaurants, like Turkish restaurants, but I mean it's like Greek food, so it's usually quite like safe. And Spanish restaurants, I do eat out, but I'm always making them aware, and I think if I don't think they're going to take it seriously, then I just want to eat them.
There's a real gut instinct there, right?
Yeah, and I think it's so important for people to go with that gut instinct. I think I said on my stories the other day, I went to a pub and the guy was like, oh yeah, there's no nuts in the kitchen or on the menu, and literally looked at the menu 2 minutes later, and like one of them was like, yeah, a nut roast with everybody nut on there. So I pulled him back over. It's like, you told me there's no nuts in the kitchen, but you've got a nut roast and you've got peanuts on the side of your bar, near the pints and the drinks. And he was like, oh yeah. And I was like, so I'm like looking at him like, and I was like, well, you've just told me there's no nuts. Like, how can I trust you now? And literally was like quite blunt. And then he kind of went away, and then I felt like he was like saying it to the other team members. You know, when someone like sniggers, but then like looks over, and I was like, "Nah, I'm not eating it." So I was like, I shouted him over, I was like, "I want the bill," because he come over, was like, "Are you eating it?" I was like, "Well, no." Like, I think he knew why. I basically was pretty, a bit blunt, but I think obviously it's like I don't want to be rude because like you just. You know what I mean? Like, the last thing I want to be is like rude to someone, but he probably doesn't understand the seriousness of allergies. But then it's up to you then whether you want to put your life in their hands. And in that situation, I didn't, and we are elsewhere kind of thing. But it is frustrating. And I think for me, when I walk into a pub and you see peanuts next to the bar straight away, like I'm paranoid about drinking a pint then, because I'm like, well, if they've touched the glass and I've touched the glass and touched my face. So yeah, it's a weird one. Like.
It's tricky. It's really tricky. And I think, you know, with this guy, and you get so much from someone the first time when you mention food allergies and their immediate response. Like the amount of times I'm like, oh, my children have got food allergies. Are we okay to eat here? And they're like, yeah, what are they allergic to? And I'll say dairy, and they'll go, we've got plenty of gluten-free options. I'm like, no. Well, they can eat gluten.
Yeah.
And, you know, that immediate kind of lack of understanding makes me immediately kind of like,
yeah, not so sure.
Yeah. And then it's like, I don't know where it's going to go from there.
Does it help, Will, that Freddie's got allergies, so that they've got each other in that sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, although, so Freddie was allergic to milk, but then he's outgrown his milk allergy.
Oh, okay.
So that comes with difficulties because we need to get milk into Freddie's diet.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really like it because he's 6 and he's never had it. And it's got quite a sour taste if you're quite new to milk.
Imagine, yeah.
So, you know, we've tried all sorts of ways to do it, but we can't be too like, this is really delicious, because we're really conscious that Will's sitting there. And so,
ways to say it,
you know, it's trying to get that balance and how we get that right. Luckily, Will is amazingly kind of compassionate and understanding, which I'm always amazed by. But as we try and persuade Freddie to have milk at the same time as hard, keeping it away from Will. So that's tricky. But then there is also quite a lot of solidarity, you know, in the fact that they share this condition. They both can't have eggs. And we work quite hard at home to kind of make sure that, you know, they have really good cakes and really good, you know, other things. But I'm finding as Will grows older that we were in the supermarket the other day and he went over to the cake section and the bread section. He was like, I'm going to choose something new. And as he looked around all of the labels, he just began to realise he couldn't have any of them. And I guess we've shielded so much of that because there are more products becoming available, because we have good things at home, because we've sought them out kind of thing. And I think there's this realization that is coming now on quite how big this is, and it's how we navigate.
It's so interesting, because I mean, I never go to the bakery or eat from coffee shops, or like you say, I never go even when we go to the supermarkets and got all the nice donuts and bread, and I never, I would never eat it, because it's always got that may contain label on it. So I can imagine, like, it must be quite daunting in the sense that. But I think there's still ways around it. There's still like bread I can have. I just can't get fresh bakery bread.
No, there's totally ways around it. Yeah. I think it's just that moment where you realise you've always had the way around it. Other people can have this and you can't. I think it's that realisation. It will get better. And, you know, he loves lots and lots and lots and lots of things. And there's so much. And I really like to focus on what you can eat, which is huge and far more than what you can't eat. But I guess in certain environments, there's a lot more of what you can't eat, perhaps. And he's getting to know those environments now, whereas he's been quite shielded from that.
Just before we jump on to kind of the journey of the Allergy Team, how was it then in regards to him going, like the kids, like Will and Freddie, going to like food, like at parties or kind of events? Because I remember me growing up as a kid, like my mum always had to like bring me sandwiches or like do me a little packed lunch. And I remember for like, you know, like 60th or anniversary parties, like there's got like a buffet of food, and I remember like never eating it. How's that been for kind of like Will and Freddie? Yeah,
similar. So with birthday parties, as Will's grown older, the parties have become less like whole class parties and a bit more kind of like, I don't know, 7 or 8 boys,
Yeah.
then they're often good friends of Will's, and actually the parents will often cater the whole party so it's safe for Will, which is amazing. Or if they have a cake that's not safe, I'll bring something, or some of them have even made a cake for Will and another cake. Good hack is to have a cake pre-sliced in your freezer so you can just take a piece out, so then Will can have cake whenever.
Do you find it weird, but when someone's once said to me, right, I made this cake, maybe it's a work situation, I made this cake, it's definitely got no nuts in it, but I'm like, I still can't eat it because even though you told me there's no nuts in it, I wasn't there when you made it. Like, is it that thing, like, I can imagine where a parent has potentially made a cake and they've turned around to yourself, Sarah, and being like, there's no nuts in it, I've checked all the ingredients. From your point of view, would you let him eat it, or would you be like, no, like, just in case? Like,
I think it totally depends. There are some parents I 100% would let him eat it because I know that they totally have it.
That's good.
Others I'm more nervous of, whether that's because I don't know them as well, but some parents, you know, even if I don't know them, will send me like, okay, I'm using this spread, I'm using this chocolate, I'm using this, and they take photographs of every bit of it. And then I do, like, because it's brilliant. And people are, I think the understanding of food allergy has gone up a lot and people are understanding it more. We went to the kids' cake sale at school about 6 weeks ago, a bit longer maybe. I was blown away by it. Half of one table was entirely kind of specialist, kind of like whether it was allergy friendly, vegan, whatever. It was really well labeled. And I decided for the first time to risk, and also I knew the person who was behind the cake sale,
that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, exactly. Who had the knife and was cutting up the bits of cake, and I really trusted her. So I asked, there was a huge queue. I went to the front of the queue and I said to the teacher who was at the front, do you mind if we just, you know, because I'm a bit worried about cross-contamination. She's like, no problem. So we were allowed to go in at the sort of towards the beginning. And my friend was on the thing, so I knew, and I said to her, and actually there hadn't been a piece taken from the cake, but even if there had been, if she had done it, I know that she would have. And there were separate knives on all of them, so already it was massively safer and reassuring. And I bought a piece of cake from someone who I have no idea who made it, but because the ingredients and because it was all there, I took a risk. And you know, it was a risk because of course they might have missed a make contain, or they might have done something, but I felt in an environment that was safe, and it was so well labeled that I thought they knew what they would do, and it was fine.
I think it's one of them. I think if you go your gut feeling, you know that person and you've got that trust there, and you think you've spoke to them and said, oh, like,
but I didn't actually know the person who made the cake. I knew my friend who was on it, who was cutting up the cake. Okay. So I knew there hadn't been cross-contamination between that and another cake. But because it was so well labelled and everything was well thought through, you know, we had our kit on us. We were in the school. We were also not in a remote area. The boys were well. There was, you know, all the factors with it. But yeah. And so they had a piece of cake from the cake sale.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that must have been nice for him, not feeling like excluded where he couldn't eat like any of the cakes. And I think for me, even now, I don't really eat cakes because you go to the supermarket and half of them have, or 99% have got make contain. That's the one thing I feel I miss on having an allergy is like desserts.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a massive opportunity there. Like,
and I think nuts, so my children aren't allergic. Well, Will isn't allergic to nuts. He's allergic to dairy and egg. And I think nuts is, well, may contain with chocolate is obviously, may contain milk with chocolate is obviously a big problem.
Yeah.
But may contain nuts, I think, on dessert is really hard. Yeah. And I think, yeah. But
I thought it'd be great to kind of talk about the journey of the Allergy Team and obviously how that come about, or did it come about because of frustration in terms of like lack of content out there kind of aimed at families with kids with allergies? Can we kind of talk about the kind of story behind that and how your experience being kind of a TV producer has probably actually quite helped in terms of creating content to a high quality? Because I think sometimes the production isn't quite there, so it doesn't kind of maybe resonate as much as some pieces of content. Do you think that's helped? And
Yeah, definitely. So the reason the Allergy Team came about is because, well, as I said earlier, when Will was first diagnosed, there was such poor sort of help once you left the hospital environment with managing day to day. Now that has improved in the last 9 years, definitely, but there's still no kind of hand holding. And we really wanted to be the kind of comprehensive place to come to help you, whether it was the tools you need to read an ingredient, whether it's mental health support for you as a parent or for your child, and just be a kind of portal to practical help to help children with food allergies in the first instance thrive, and you know, to let people know that they can do whatever they want to do. They just need to perhaps do a couple of things beforehand to make that possible. You know, so many people are nervous about eating out, or don't know how to start weaning, or are scared about starting school. But there's all these parents who've trod this journey before. So can we pull together that advice and help to help people kind of going through it now?
Yeah.
And yes, definitely being in television before really helped. Firstly, and the thing I'm most glad of is, you know, I worked on quite positive programs like Your Home Made Perfect, which was always trying to make things better. And can you bring that positivity? And there's quite a lot of negative things about food allergy, and a lot of fear, and a lot of, you know, the child in the corner with the food allergies who can't play football or is wheezy. You know, there's a perception there, right? That
100%. Like, there was a show on Netflix like recently where the kid with the allergy was like the kind of nerdy, kind of a bit of a creep, like taking pictures of people, and like it's just like, it's really annoying. Like the whole perception on TV and media is like,
or a bit of eye roll in the corner. Oh, they've got allergies, you know, like, and I just want to like get rid of that and be much more like, people with food allergies are ordinary people.
The
like,
normal people, we still have a normal life. And it really annoys me when people are like, I'm defined by my allergy. Like, I think like, I mean, everyone has their own opinion, but I'm not. Like, I'm not defined by my allergy, and I speak very openly about that. But then there's some people like, oh, I am defined by my allergy. Well, yeah, I mean, it's your experience, but then I don't think that's positive then on other people. And if someone read that, then I don't think it's that positive really, by being like, I'm defined by it. I mean, for me, it's part of me, but I'm not defined by it. I think, yeah, don't get me wrong, it's part of me, but you can still live a normal life. And I think it's just getting that right messaging, because I think sometimes the messaging sometimes from some accounts can be quite negative, and by doing that, it's just spreading more negativity. Like, and
I don't want to dwell on the fear. You know, we're all conscious. You know, with your food allergy, me as the mother of children with food allergies, we're really conscious of how bad it can be when it goes wrong. Yeah. And so it's trying to move away from that to kind of go, okay, so let's make sure something doesn't go wrong. So what do we need to put that in place to then, you know, for that not to happen? And through education, and training and support and information, making it much safer for people with food allergies. So we've done quite a lot of work as well in the Allergy Team with food businesses. We did a piece for Greg's where we went into, and it was a piece for their staff so that they understood the emotional impact of food allergy.
That's so interesting. You say the emotional impact, because I think a lot of the time, unless they know someone with a food allergy, whether that's a friend or a family member, they don't really have that emotional connection to food allergy. So it's quite interesting to kind of hear your experience, how you kind of covered that topic to make them more aware.
Yeah, so using our TV skills and storytelling, you know, using, you know, with interviews with people, trying to get that story and message across. So, you know, people who have had food allergy training, they're not just going through the motions. They really realize why this is so important, because I bet your friends are much more conscious about cross-contamination and separation,
even
because they're
people
thinking of you.
With, yes. I was getting the bus back the other day, and one of the new joiners, Tom, was like, oh, like, before I met you, I didn't understand how serious food allergies was. And he's like, even like your Instagram page and blog is so educational, and like I'm learning so much. And it's like, yeah, before I met you, I just didn't understand. And I heard that all the time. Like, unless they know someone, then they probably don't get how serious food allergies can be.
Yeah, and then there's a large catering company, Sodexo. We've done some work with them. Again, similar films for their staff to really make that emotional connection.
Yeah.
So we're going to do more of that as well, sort of working with companies to make sure that people really understand.
Yeah.
And then work with schools as well, so that people who are in school now hopefully leave school understanding. So the chefs of the future and so on can really kind of know how to look after people with food allergy.
I think that's really interesting when you spoke about the skills and doing kind of like a workshop/course to kind of make them aware about how serious food allergies are. I think it's a really good idea, to be honest, in regards to, because skills sometimes that in terms of the education, it can be different, like you say, for each of the different skills.
Well, like your friend Aaron.
Yeah.
You know, that should never, ever happen.
Yeah.
And so training for schools is completely imperative from a safety point of view and from an inclusion point of view.
Yeah.
And to get both of those right. And it's it can be a really daunting condition for someone responsible to manage. And so let's make that easier by giving them information and the tools and educating them so that they can feel much more on top of it. So they're not feeling anxious either dealing with it.
Yeah. And I was going to say, in regards to going forward, what does the future kind of hold for the allergy team?
Well, the big thing for this year is bringing out our course for schools.
Amazing.
So we're making that at the moment. Been doing some filming on that this morning. And so that'll be coming out later this year. And then also a kind of membership kind of thing for our website and for families, so that we can continue to harness the community and continue to kind of provide content, whether that's courses, guides, workshops and stuff for families living with food allergy.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, the kind of community aspect in regard to kind of supporting each other kind of through these projects and kind of journeys and kind of getting everyone involved to kind of help each other out in that sense.
Totally. And by using really good quality, verified, kind of reviewed information, not just sort of, there are a lot of people putting stuff out that perhaps isn't always verified or, and often with good intention, but not necessarily. And so making sure that all of our stuff is reviewed and looked after.
And verified, yeah. No, that's amazing. So if anyone wants to kind of find out more about the kind of the Allergy Team, what's your kind of website and kind of like Instagram handles so people can follow you?
It's all quite easy. theallergyteam.com. Instagram, The Allergy Team. Twitter, Facebook, it's all there.
I guess what it is,
We're mainly on Instagram and our website. But our newsletter, that's what people should really sign up to, because that has all the information on events and also discount codes. Yeah,
I really want to do a newsletter this year. It's been on the agenda. I've got a thing called Notion. I've heard of it. It's like for like my note kind of planning. So all my notes from like ideas for Instagram to like kind of like blogs to podcasts, it's like a mini website for your notes. It's really cool.
I think I need it.
Check it out,
yeah.
And I just want to end it on, what kind of piece of advice would you give to parents out there with food allergies in regards to them kind of managing it?
Find your allies. So friends, grandparents, teachers, whoever it is who really understands food allergy, because they will make your life so much easier, especially if as your children grow older, you've got another parent who can take your child on a play date and you feel 100% that they'll be safe, because actually just having support like that, then it's someone else who can mind your child at football if you can't do that drop off, or can pick them up for an hour, or just someone who gets it.
Yeah, no, that's a great piece of advice. So yeah, thank you for that. And what question would you give to the next guest on the podcast, which you would want to know the answer to?
What is the most inspiring piece of advice they've been given?
Amazing. All right, I'll make sure to ask that on the next podcast. So thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the podcast. And like I said, if anyone gets a chance to kind of check out the amazing work with the Allergy Team on Instagram, on the website as well, make sure to check that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye.